Hello, this is Anthony. Let's walk and talk. So, today we're going to talk about labels and the irony around labels. So, the first thing that's going to come up is you're going to say, what do you mean the irony around labels? I know what labels are. Labels are what I call myself or what I tie to. And you'd be exactly right. That's exactly what we're going to talk about. And the irony about it is everything we're going to talk about around it. You see, what's interesting is how when you walk a certain path and you begin to better understand the self, as well as, I'm going to see if we go this way, maybe it'll be a little less noisy. You begin to understand the self, and you begin to understand the human experience in terms of your individual journey, whatever that may be. You're here to experience different things, different cycles, different narratives. You see, everybody in these spaces of spirituality, they teach different levels, I guess, or parts of the process, the evolutionary process of the soul on the journey. So what happens is some people talk about the lowest version, which is the victim mentality, as I heard the other day, called the to me. Then others teach about the by me, where you just go out and hustle. And then others teach about the through me, where you start to really understand that you experience your life through how you view it, in essence. And when you start to take a step back and trust, you begin to better understand how the simulation works, or how the world works, how Earth School works. For me, I talk about the other level, the next level, which is more the concept of an understanding of unity, that we're all one, that you and the universe are not separate, that you and Creator are really the same thing, that you are consciousness incarnated to understand self. But in that, I also like to talk about that concept of through me. Now, the thing about it is as we talk about these different steps on the journey, it's important to understand that they're all connected. These aren't just you hit the next level and you're there. You see, the problem with the human brain and this existence is we experience it more in a linear manner, but that's not how the evolution of the soul works. You see, we experience it in a linear manner because you understand that we have allowed ourselves to be governed by time, and we have found ourselves in that space-time paradox or system. But the soul exists outside of space-time. Consciousness exists outside of space-time and projects itself in. Now, the reason that these things are important is because when you project your consciousness in, then you are subject to duality, and in duality, that's where you start to understand the ego, or the illusion, or the false self. Now, when you want to talk about, when we're having this discussion about these concepts, the reason this is important to understand this is because the ego manifests itself in a lot of different ways. But one of the ways that it manifests itself is in labels. And what's interesting about labels is the ego will use labels to make itself more grandiose, in some ways to self-gratify itself, in terms of creating the character in which your soul is playing in this existence. I say character playing in this existence because what you understand then is that who you are in this existence is not who you think you are. Who you are is a character or a story that you're playing. And when you start to take that step back and recognize that you are the observer of the experience, you're essentially watching the movie that you helped co-create. Now, here's how the labels prevent you from fully experiencing your existence. You see, you get here, and in order to seat yourself, in order to connect with others, the ego creates labels to create connection, to create the ability to interact, to try to describe self in the present. However, that becomes limiting, because when you understand that you are a spiritual being having a human experience, you understand that you are your soul, you are the observer, you understand that the labels are an absolute illusion. And so as you grow, you start to shed the labels, because you understand that the labels are create limiting barriers of who you are and your experience. And anytime you start adding label after label after label, what you're doing is you're allowing yourself, or the mind, the ego, to limit the experience that you're capable of having. Now, that's not to say that there aren't certain things in the illusion that are hardwired, such as, people are trying to play with the boundaries of gender and things like that. But there are certain things that are hardwired. And yeah, you can go and try to change those things, but the experience isn't necessarily going to change, because you're still going to experience the things that you're attempting to escape from by doing that, which is by truly accepting, understanding, and loving self. Because when you do that, what happens is you don't require that external validation. And when you get to that point, then the label is pointless. You see, the funny thing about the ego and about labels is you are wholeheartedly willing to give yourself a label, but if someone else gives you a label, then you reject that label, then the ego rejects it. And that's the paradox, you see. If you are willing to accept and place a label upon yourself, but you are in a space where you choose to ignore, get angry about, run away from, not accept a label that somebody else gives you, well, see, that's part of the journey. So it's almost as if it's your soul pointing to your need for validation, to say that if somebody tags a label on you and you choose to resist it, maybe you're resisting it because what's actually happening is someone is defining you from an external experience that hasn't had your internal experience, and it could trigger you. Likely it's going to trigger you because there's something inside from, say, maybe your childhood or throughout your current experience that you feel has held you back or prevented you from having the most authentic experience that you desire. Yet on the journey, you start to also understand that in solitude is where you find self. Once you discover self in solitude, then you soon discover that what everybody else thinks doesn't really matter. How someone else labels you, it doesn't matter. And how you label yourself lacks a lot of importance. The reason this is an important aspect to understand is because it allows you to start to see the real you, the infinite you, the you who's the observer, the you who's having the experience. And the more you on the bridge, the more you open yourself up to more of an expansive and unified view of your experience, the more you essentially open your experience up to change and evolve in a manner in which allows you to change and evolve your experiences, for lack of a better approach. So, labels, that's why they are, they're a bit of a paradox, or a bit of a, I don't know, almost hilarity in some ways. You see, no one asks the question about, if I give myself a label, why do I get upset if somebody else gives me a label? And that's when you can start to really, truly identify the ego in the moment. That's when you can really, truly start to identify what is actually you and part of the experience you want to have, and what is being created to take away from your experience and take away from your internal validation of self. But what say you? How do you feel about that? Do you think labels are something necessary? You think labels are something appropriate? Now, we're not talking about laws or rules, we're talking about labels, because we could get into another video about the difference between order and rules versus control. When you start to understand that the labels limit your experience, that's when you can start to understand how you can truly change your experience. As always, if you enjoy this content, please like, share, and subscribe. I am truly grateful. Until I talk to you again, peace, love, light, and I hope you have the most amazing day.